guys, it's Kristen, and I am so excited to be back with y'all. This is the first, obviously, video that I've recorded since coming back from having a baby, from having Caroline. I just re-entered the world of Girl Define and kind of getting back into things, and I'm really excited to share my whole birth story with you guys and to officially, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see a little baby here sitting next to me, which is just so crazy. It is so crazy. It still blows my mind. Every time I look at her, I'm just like, how? How do I have a baby? How do I have this little cutie? She's going to be with me this whole time. So if you're listening, you can't see her cuteness right now. But you can hear her. Caroline, can you say hello? Can you say hello? Yeah. Oh, she's like, oh, all these lights, the camera. She is just she's such a sweetie and such a massive blessing. I love her so much, if you can't tell. And as I record this, Caroline is about 14 weeks, a little more than 14 weeks old, and she's really tired right now. So we're going to see how this goes. There might be a lot of cuts because there might be some screams coming, but we'll see. Right, baby? But yeah, many of y'all know the backstory for me. I've shared a lot with Zach of just our journey. We've been married now for 13 years. And our journey of infertility, recurrent miscarriage, and ultimately the diagnosis of unexplained infertility from doctors saying, we don't know why you're not able to get pregnant, or when you do, you miscarry really early on. We don't, we've done all the tests, we've done everything. We don't really know what's going on. So for us, just like the dream of having a family, we just never knew what that would look like. And I've shared in the past just my journey of coming to places of surrender again and again, of having this longing so bad for motherhood and not knowing if that would ever become a reality, and really wrestling with the question, if this never becomes a reality, is God enough? Is my relationship with him enough? Is he what he says he is, which is he is our all in all. He's the satisfaction of our souls. He is all that we truly need, right? Our relationship with him to be ultimately satisfied. As a Christian, we say these words and we might believe this theologically, but when it's put to the test, you really come face to face. Ooh, that was Caroline's burp, if you could hear that. Wow, that's always better out than in, right? Oh, and a big spit up. Okay, we're just off to a really great start here. All right, it's always handy when you have a son offset who can throw you a quick burp cloth because you forgot to bring one into the recording. All right, as we were saying, you got it all out, my girl? Are we feeling better? Oh, it's so great. So yeah, coming to terms with like, okay, God has different plans for each of us, and maybe for Zach and me, for our marriage, maybe his plan isn't that we would have kids. But of course, my longing and desire for that never went away. Every single year, it was a prayer. It was a plea. We had so many friends and just family members praying for us. And then many of y'all know the story of us adopting our boys in 2021. Yep. And just Caleb and Christian, massive blessings and gifts. And you can go back and watch our video just talking about that whole story. And it was great. So now we have these two boys. They were 10 and 6 at the time, and it was just awesome. Like, such massive answer to prayer. So grateful, so exciting. Our little family of 4. And I just remember thinking like, wow, if this is the family that God has for us, like if we don't ever have any more, that will be awesome. Like I just love this so much. But of course, there's still that longing and that desire. Like, yeah, we would love to have more kids. And our boys even started praying for more and started praying for a baby. And we were joining them in that prayer of like praying for a baby, but really holding it with such an open hand because we just had obviously no idea if that would ever happen. And just really trying to set the expectations with them. Like, yeah, God can do this, but we don't know. It's been a journey, and sharing some of that with them. And so lo and behold, all that to say, Caroline was such a shocking, massive, just miracle, I will say. Like, surprise, but just it felt like a miracle. Like, this was something that I just never imagined could happen. And when I found out I was pregnant, I was over the moon excited with joy, like Zach and I both. This was in the fall of 2023 when I found out. And for me, there was like such a mix of emotions of so much joy and excitement and anticipation, but then at the same time, a lot of like fear that came into my heart and just the unknowns. And then looking back at my history of the miscarriages, it was just that reality of like, oh my goodness, here we are, pregnancy number 4. Just statistically, this has never worked out for us. And so is that going to be the story again? And just wrestling with the fear of like, it probably will be. And so almost not really wanting to accept the pregnancy, not really wanting to believe, like to accept the reality that it was happening, because I felt so like scared to get attached to something that in my mind, I felt like would most likely end, just because it always had. And so I share there's a whole pregnancy video. I'll link it below. Zach and I share the whole story together. So I won't get into all the details there of just that whole journey and the ups and downs and times when I thought I was miscarrying and I wasn't. If you want to hear that story, go back and watch it if you haven't, or listen to it. But y'all know, obviously, here's Caroline. So the pregnancy made it, praise God. I mean, so many prayers around that. And she was born June 14th, 2024. So as we record this, like I said, she's just over 14 weeks. And I want to just kind of share with you like that whole process of her birth story, because that was something that I was even like to have a baby, to give birth to a baby. I was scared to even imagine that, because for me, it felt like such a far away thing. Like it would never happen. That, you know, a lot of women have dreams of like this, I want this for my birth story and I want it to look this way. And I would love it if, you know, 1, 2, 3, like the ABC, these things could happen. And for me, it was like, if I could just carry the baby full term, you know, at least close to full term, and have a healthy baby. Like for me, that's my birth story. That's all I want. Like that's my prayer. Very simple. I don't care how she comes into this world as long as she comes into this world. So that was my prayer. And I'm glad that in a lot of ways I had that kind of just openness to it, because something that I knew was a big possibility was that I would have to have a C-section. And the reason for that is when I, like back in 2019, I think, I actually had a surgery, a myomectomy, to remove a fibroid that was attached to the outside of my uterus. And it wasn't huge, it wasn't small, kind of medium in size. And I remember my surgeon at the time told me that if I were to ever get pregnant, I would have to have a C-section because of the position of this fibroid, where it was attached to the uterus, where, you know, kind of the incision that happened there, it compromised my uterus enough that I now ran the risk of rupture if I were to get pregnant and go into labor. And so she told me then, you know, if you ever get pregnant, you're going to have a C-section because you run the risk of a ruptured uterus at that point, or because of the surgery. And at the time, you know, 2019, I'm thinking, no problem, great, you know, getting pregnant's like, for me, that's the hard part. Like that is the prayer, the goal. I don't care, you know, how this baby needs to come into the world as long as they can come into the world. We just got all sorts of little stuff going on here. She ate right before, so she's just got a little spit up action. We're doing good though. You're doing good. So I knew that was a big possibility, but I wanted to get a second opinion. So my OB was someone obviously different than the surgeon who did the myomectomy. And when I told her, you know, I started going like right away, because my pregnancies have always been risky and miscarriage. So I went like early. I'm like earliest appointment. And she, you know, I explained everything to her, and she's like, yeah, she actually knew the surgeon. She was friends with her, had worked with her. And she said, if she said that you would need a C-section, then I believe her, but I'll get all the paperwork from back then. I'll look at the records. I'll look at, you know, the incision, the pictures, like all that stuff. And I will, you know, let you know my opinion. So she did. And she said, based on what she saw, she agreed with the surgeon that having a C-section would be the safest option. That I did run the risk of rupture. So it's funny, you know, before pregnancy, I did have that open-handedness, but then once it was kind of final, like you're going to have a C-section, I had a mix of emotions. Like I was sad in a lot of ways that I wouldn't be able to experience just a vaginal birth, you know, but at the same time, I was like, I am so thankful for technology and for medical doctors and the opportunity to be able to bring my baby, Lord willing, safely into the world through a C-section. So it was kind of just a quick moment of like, okay, I will never experience a vaginal birth, but that's okay. Like, praise God that I have the opportunity, this thing I prayed for so long, to give birth to a baby, even if it's C-section. So it was scheduled, and because of the risk of rupture, they usually like to schedule it 2 to 3 weeks early, just so that you don't get into that, you know, full term where you start having potential like contractions and stuff. And so I was scheduled for 2.5 weeks before her due date. So she was due early July, and then the C-section was scheduled for mid-June. Hi, what's up? There's Caroline. You saying hi? She likes to look at my nails. All the colors, so fun. Hey, my nail color matches her little blue in her outfit. So sweet. What do you think about that? So 2.5 weeks early, which was another thing I really had to surrender. I had no idea that I would even wrestle with that. So technically she wasn't preterm, she's considered early term. So, right, there's preterm, early term now. So when any 37, 38 is considered early term, not full term anymore. Now 39 to 40 is considered term, and then post-term is 41, 42. So she was considered early term. And I just remember in my heart wrestling with like, oh man, I don't love the fact that I have to have this scheduled C-section and we have to take her out of me before she's ready to come, right? Like she's not choosing to come out. We're taking her out obviously for very important reasons. It's for her safety ultimately, because a ruptured uterus would be really catastrophic for both of us. And so I knew the reasons were good, but at the same time, I was like, oh, she's just not going to be like fully cooked, like quite ready. But at the same time, it's the safest option all around for both of us and for her good. So, a little bit of heart wrestling there. But I will say on the flip side, the benefits, I decided to look at everything through the perspective of like, instead of what's negative about this, what's positive about this? And I was like, okay, what's positive about this is that I have an amazing doctor who has an incredible record for doing really, really good C-sections. Like I had a friend who had a surgery with her and she did an excellent job and all of that. And so I felt really confident about my doctor and just her experience and going into that. And then also just the convenience, right? I mean, I had to have it. It's not like there was another option. So I chose to just be thankful for the C-section and the convenience of having it scheduled and knowing exactly what day she was going to be born on. In fact, we got to pick her birthday, which was really cool. There was a week and my doctor said, I have anything that week, the week that we had to schedule it. She's like, what day do you want? And we're like, we like this day. And so she's like, great, let's do it that day. So that was kind of sweet and kind of weird at the same time. Like, wow, we're like picking her birthday. But we got to pick a day that worked well just from a practical standpoint of family being available to help watch our other kids. Family being available to come. Like my mom, I really wanted her to be with me in the hospital and just with us for that weekend stay. It was a time that my mother-in-law was able to watch our boys and that other family members were going to be around so they could meet her and all that stuff. So I was like, okay, Lord, there are blessings in this, even though it's not all exactly the way I would have written it. None of my journey toward motherhood has been that. So I'm used to that by now, but thanking him for those things. So we had the date, it was scheduled, and then leading up to it, it was just preparation, getting all the things ready. And it was so fun just to go to the store and like have a baby shower and a lot of emotions. I cried like every 3 minutes at my baby shower, like tears of joy, but also just feeling overwhelmed by the fact that it was like a baby shower for me. I had been to so many for friends and for sisters and cousins, but never for me. So getting to be the one getting celebrated and the one that was pregnant and having the baby was so overwhelming, but in like a really good way, just like the goodness of God and all of that. So all of those fun things leading up to the birth and just the anticipation and the preparation. And even though I was about 2.5 weeks from my due date when it came time to have the C-section, I was feeling very pregnant. And even though like I'm really tall, so I wasn't showing like my belly, like there's just a lot of room up and down. So I wasn't like sticking way out. So a lot of people were like, what? You're like giving birth? You barely look pregnant, And I'm like, oh, I feel it. Like the worst symptoms for me were extremely bad heartburn, which a lot of people are like, oh, that means you're having a girl or whatever. Like it's like a sign. I'm like, well, we already knew she was a girl because we found out the gender, but really, really bad heartburn and then really bad leg cramps at night. And yes, I was taking all the things and trying all the stuff and it just wasn't really helping. They weren't really going away and the heartburn was so bad and I never get heartburn. So those two symptoms I know, mild compared to what some people experience, but those were the most uncomfortable parts for me. So I was kind of like, okay, I'm ready to have her. Like, let's go. Let's do this thing. So when the morning came, it was a Friday, we had to be at the hospital at 6. And of course, only Zach the husband's allowed to come into the surgery room where I'm going to have the C-section. And he was there. My mom was at the hospital already ready in our the recovery room where I was going to be for the weekend. And she had some food and sisters had prepared food. So we were well equipped with snacks and like healthy, nourishing meals. So we arrive at 6 and we do all the things. And we'd already gone the day before to do a walkthrough and to do all the paperwork. Oh, baby's so tired. And she's doing amazing. Wow. Caroline, you're crushing it. And so we were ready. We had done all like the paperwork, the signing, the disclaimers, like all the billing stuff. And so when we got there Friday morning, all we had to do, it was mostly for me, just like preparation and all the things that they do to prep you for surgery. So it was just so weird to know like we're going in at 6 and she's going to be here at 8. Like we knew that she was going to be here at 8 in the morning. And it was just so weird, like the most interesting birth story, to like have it so planned and so scheduled, and to know like when you're showing up and when she's going to arrive and when family could come see her. It was just like kind of weird, but also at the same time, I was looking for the positives. Like, wow, what a gift. We can tell our family like, hey, come around noon and you'll be able to meet Caroline. We already had the name picked out. We knew that's what we wanted. And so, no, baby, so tired. You want to sit this way? Here we go. And so Zach and I, 6, it's like 7, 8, and then they wheel me into the room where we're going to have the C-section. And it's just like bright lights everywhere, lots of people, which I had been prepped for because I'm a researcher. I'm like, I love to know what to expect. I was talking to all my friends who'd had C-sections. I was listening to all the podcasts, so I knew to expect a lot of people in the room, like a lot of different doctors and nurses and techs and the anesthesiologist and all sorts of people. And it was the room, there were probably like 10 or 12 people in there. And so you come in and you're like, okay, here we go. Let's get this party started. And they obviously, I scoot over from them. I walk in and then they get me up on the table and I first have to get the epidural to get all the numbing. And that was like, I was prepared for that because I'd also, again, talked to friends and done the research. But what was really weird is that when he gave me the shot in my lower back, he hit a nerve and it was making my left leg spasm like crazy. And he's telling me like, okay, hold still. And I'm like, I cannot control this. Like my leg was like bouncing so much. And he's like, you kept telling me to hold still. I'm like, I am out of control. Like, I don't know what is going on, but you're hitting some nerve and my leg is spazzing. And I kept telling him like, I don't know what's happening. I can't stop it. And so that was kind of hilarious. So we got through that, thankfully, and he didn't have to go back in again because that was not as painful as I guess I was expecting, but also like the spazzing leg and like the nerve, that was probably the worst part about it. But got through that, and it was just so weird then laying down on the table and everything from my waist down is completely numb. But my brain and like I'm awake, I'm aware. And I've had surgeries in the past. Like I had a sports injury. I had surgery on my ACL, actually both knees, and like something else. Oh, my myomectomy where I went completely under. So you're like completely out of it and you wake up and you're on the other side of it. And they're like, this is what happened. You're recovering. Everything's great. And you're kind of groggy and you're like, where am I? This was so weird because I've never only been half numb, where half of my body was numb, but my brain and my awareness is completely there. And that was something that was really bizarre. So I'm completely numb from the waist down. And I had, you hear those horror stories of women who are like, I could feel the incision, in the C-section, I could feel when they were cutting, I was in excruciating pain. I wasn't fully numb. And those are really pretty rare. And I had a friend though who had that happen, and hers was more of an emergency situation. So I don't know all that went on there, but I was just like, Lord, please let me not feel anything. And they said, they're like, no. I even asked them, I'm like, is there any chance that this isn't going to fully work and I'm going to feel something? And they're like, no. Like, you're good. We'll do like a test where they like kind of poke you or do something down there. And they ask you like, can you feel it? And if not, obviously that means you're going to be fine. So they did that and I couldn't feel anything. And I didn't even know they were like touching me. And they're like, okay, did you feel that? I'm like, feel what? Nope. And they're like, okay, we're good to go. So they sterilized everything, got it all prepared. And I'm just laying there kind of watching all of this happen. They're moving my legs around and repositioning me because I can't really move myself anymore. And then one of the nurses was like, okay, so what kind of music do you want? And I had heard about people who had music playing. By the way, this was a family-centered C-section. So it was very much done they were trying to mimic like a vaginal birth as much as possible. So natural birth. And I love that. My doctor was all for that. She's actually one of the ones who pioneered this family-centered C-section style. And the hospital that I was at, this is really common there. So that was one thing I really loved about the hospital, about my doctor. So I said I would love just like an instrumental worship playlist. And so they just pulled one up. I think it was like Pandora. Instrumental Christian worship. And, I'm recognizing all the songs as they're playing, just like the music without the lyrics. And it was so calming because I would hear the music and I knew what song that was. And I would just be thinking of the lyrics in my head. And it was just so calming for me to be kind of meditating on these beautiful worship songs, beautiful hymns as I'm preparing to meet my daughter for the first time and go through this major surgery. So that was really soothing, really calming. And then of course, Zach was there with me and he got to sit right next to me. So he's like right there with me. I've got my arms up. They're doing all their thing down low. The music's playing. And then my doctor says, okay, it's time. And in a blink of an eye, they're like they've got this down. They've done a lot of these. Immediately, this whole like blue curtain with clear plastic goes like right up, right on top of my belly. So obviously my belly's under facing all the doctors on the other side. And it goes right up, like right up here, like kind of by my neck a little bit. And it goes up. And as soon as that went up, I just started crying. Like I was overwhelmed, not because I was scared of the C-section or nervous about what was going to happen there. I really wasn't, minus like my one fear of like feeling something. I wasn't really like nervous about that at all. I've had surgeries and I've done a lot just over the years with infertility and a lot of testing I've had done. So I'm kind of used to like things happening down there. So for me, that wasn't something that I was really nervous about. But when the curtain went up, to me, it was like, oh my goodness, I'm about to meet my daughter. For the first time, I am about to, like a baby is about to come out of me and I'm about to meet her. And this is something that I've been anticipating for so long, praying for so long, something I never, ever imagined would even become my reality. And like the emotions of all of that just hit me and I just started crying. And Zach was like, kind of squeezing me. And I told him, I was like, I'm not scared. I'm not crying because I'm nervous. I was like, I can't believe this is happening. Like I cannot believe we're about to meet her. And he's like, I know. And he was obviously getting teary-eyed as well. And so the curtain goes up and they make the, I can feel not anything painful, but like I can feel things happening, like pushing and kind of pulling and tugging. And so I don't really know like exactly what's happening, but just like in my brain being numb down there, but fully with it mentally knowing like they're cutting me, that was really weird. I'm like, I don't want to see anything that's happening down there. And thankfully, I couldn't see any of that. But when it came time for Caroline to actually get pulled out of me, I knew this was coming because this is part of the family-centered C-section, is they actually drop the blue curtain and all they leave up is the clear plastic curtain. So you can see through and actually see that moment when your baby is coming out, which is incredible. And at first I wasn't sure. I was like, ooh, like, do I want to see? That's kind of weird. Just thinking about it, like she's getting pulled out of this incision in my stomach. Like, I don't know. But I am so glad that they did that and that I got to see that moment, because when that blue curtain dropped and they were like, okay, here she comes. And you look through and you see all the doctors hovered over and Zach's right there with me. And then I see this head and these shoulders and I'm like feeling this tugging. Like I could feel the tugging. It was aggressive. And one of the other doctors was like pushing on my upper stomach to like help kind of push her out. So there was like a lot of aggressive motion. Like I was kind of like bouncing a little bit, which I did not expect that, but nothing painful, just kind of like a lot of pressure and motion and like tugging and pulling. And I look through and I see her for the first time. And I see her head and her shoulders. And then, very quickly her whole body comes out. And it was just the most overwhelming moment. And I know I've listened to a lot of podcasts and talked to friends who are like, in that moment for me, it was really overwhelming, or others are like, I just felt so disconnected. For me and my story, I was so connected to that moment. I felt so emotionally overwhelmed with joy and just like amazement at this miracle that I'm seeing through this curtain. And my doctor held her right up to the curtain and, they made sure she was breathing. So they kind of pinched her and did the things. And Caroline let out a really big scream, which was another huge answer to prayer, that she would breathe on her own right away. Being a little bit early, you just never know. And so they showed her to me and we did some delayed cord clamping. So they left her right there for a little while in front of that curtain. And my doctor was like, say hi to your daughter. And the others were saying, happy birthday, Caroline. And it was just like such an amazing moment. And I'm just looking through like, just like crying and like shocked. Like that little girl just came out of me. And so after the delayed cord clamping was done, they clamped her umbilical cord and then they dropped the curtain. And my other huge prayer and request was that she would get put on me immediately for skin to skin, that we would bypass anything else. We didn't want anything else done, any weighing or measuring or any of that business until I could have like some really good skin to skin for a while, like as long as possible. So that was another huge answer to prayer, because she didn't have to get whisked away to anything. But my doctor was able to immediately bring her around and lay her on me. And we had just skin to skin for a while, which was really sweet. And then they did have to take her away for like one really quick thing. And then they brought her back. And then I got to keep her on me until I went all the way into my recovery room. But that moment when they laid her on me, Zach has like the sweetest pictures and videos. I was like, babe, just get whatever you can. Like, I want you to be fully present in the moment. But also, like, if you can capture anything, if you're aware enough and able to, and not like overwhelmed, like I'm going to be, capture stuff. And he did. And he was able to capture the sweetest pictures and videos. But they laid her on my chest and I just crying, like looking down at her little face, when they're born, they're like all like pruny and like kind of scrunched up and their colorings, like, obviously they've been in the womb, like they just had a massive change for their environment. So they're kind of like their colors kind of bluish and then kind of turning pinkish and but just so cute, so sweet. And I just held her and like she kind of cried. She was crying. And then when they laid her on me, she stopped crying and just got like snuggly and so comforted just by being with me. And it was the sweetest moment ever. Just like mother-daughter, like right there, just like having that little sweet snuggle after all these years. So that was all and more for me than I imagined it would be that moment. It was so incredible. So she's on me, Zach's with me, we're both crying, we're both just overwhelmed. And then we go back to the recovery room. And I remember, I'm laying on that bed and they're wheeling me around and I've got Caroline on me. And we come around the corner into the room that I was going to be in for the weekend. Actually, they took me to the recovery room first. And then I went into the room that I was going to be in for the weekend. So I was there in the recovery room for maybe like 2 hours, I don't know, a couple hours. And then they took me to my actual room where I would be for the weekend. And my mom was already waiting in there and she had flowers and she had just like all sorts of little snacks and gifts and things that people had given. And I come around the corner in the bed and I see her and she sees me and we both just start crying again. Because like as my mom, she's been on this journey with me. She has walked the miles through some of my darkest valleys of struggling with infertility and the miscarriages and the loss and the unfulfilled longings and other daughters of hers having babies and us, Zach and I still struggling and just even as a mom, like all that she wants for us. And, she has her own journey when it's your children struggling, like they struggle too alongside you. And so when we locked eyes and she saw Caroline on me, we both just lost it again. There were lots of moments of just losing it with like every family member. I saw like everyone that met her. But she gets to meet Caroline for the first time and hold her and snuggle her. And I'm just watching my mom hold Caroline and I'm like, I can't believe this. Like, I cannot believe it. It was almost like I was living like it was some other reality and then I was going to wake up and it was all going to be gone. It's kind of how it felt. Like, is this really happening? So she got to meet her and then gave her back to me. And then other family members, we had a little bit of time, but other family members were kind of coming a little bit here and there. Not everybody. We have a lot of people in our family. So we were trying to space it out between that weekend and the next week, but some were able to come over and meet her. And every time, I would see a sister or see someone and they would see Caroline, they would be crying. I would be crying. And it was just like, oh my goodness. But the next sweet moment that I really want to share about was when my mother-in-law brought our boys over and they got to meet her for the first time. I will never forget this moment. And I actually got it on video, which was so sweet. I set up my phone in the corner so I could capture everything and then like later on watch it. But my mother-in-law brought our boys over and they came in and, they'd been praying for baby sister. And then eventually they knew Caroline when she was in my room when we named her. Praying for baby sister, first praying for a baby, then we knew it was a girl, praying for baby sister, and then praying for baby Caroline. And so when they got to come in and meet her and see her, oh my goodness, again, such a huge mess, lots of tears, just overwhelmed. And I'm looking at this scene of like, my boys holding her and Zach, and I'm just like, how is this happening? How is this my reality? For all these years, longing for motherhood, longing for this, and then just seeing my 3 children all together was the most, I keep saying like overwhelming and incredible, but I can't, struggling to think of other words to describe this, but that is how it was of just, Lord, you are so good. You have answered my prayer above and beyond this longing for motherhood that I had really surrendered and come to terms with the fact that it might never actually become my reality. And here I am looking at my 3 children and my boys holding my baby and just the sweetest, sweetest gift. So they got to hang out with us for a little bit and get acquainted with baby sister and ooh and ah over her. And then they left, and then they came back again a couple times throughout the weekend and got to just hang out with her. But they didn't want to leave. They're like, do we have to leave? Can we stay? I'm like, I wish, but this room's really small. And we're probably not all going to sleep here. That would be a little much. So they went back with grandma and they had a great time. But that was just so, so special to have that moment. And my sister also got some pictures of that. She came with a camera. So we captured some of those moments that we'll cherish forever. But as I was recovering, here I am now with this baby, and Zach and I are facing our first night as brand new parents to a newborn. We were already learning how to do like the teenage thing with our older son. And then, we had Christian was 10, and now we've got this newborn. So I'm like, wow, this is hilarious. We kind of did things, backwards. We got the teenager first and then the newborn, and we're just figuring it all out. So that night was really interesting. I mean, newborns sleep a lot. So she slept a lot, but just trying to breastfeed and figuring all of that out, which ended up being a lot more challenging than I had expected, which I had heard from a lot of people, like it doesn't always come easily. And for Caroline, it definitely didn't, and it's my first time. So I'm figuring things out. We're calling the lactation consultant like every couple hours, like, hey, can you come help us again? Can you come help us again? And I had taken an entire course on breastfeeding and talked to so many sisters and friends. I'm like, I can think of all the struggles. I'm in my brain troubleshooting before I'm even there. And then here I am with this newborn, and just her struggles with latching and transferring milk was really, really hard. And so the lactation consultants were really helpful. And that first night it's just newborn, right? We're up every few hours, and then the nurses are constantly coming in and poking you and prodding you. And you're right when you fall asleep and the baby's sleeping, they come in to take your blood pressure, and you're like, really? Right now? I appreciate what you're doing, but maybe in a couple hours. So kind of just getting used to the hospital life for that weekend. I will say our nurses were amazing. We had incredible care, no complaints there. The room was clean. We had a beautiful window kind of looking out over the area where the hospital was, and all of the nurses that cared for us were amazing. No complaints. So very, very thankful for that. But, you're just constantly having these interruptions, as you're trying to figure out baby and nursing and being just parents of a newborn. So we were there for 2 nights. And the second day, so we had the first night and the second day, still trying to figure out breastfeeding. I had some of the weirdest symptoms, and I had heard about some people having this after a C-section, but it's I guess not super common. I got extremely itchy from head to toe. And this happened I think during the night into the morning, the day of the C-section into that night. And I had heard that as the anesthesia is wearing off, that sometimes it can cause this really weird reaction where you get super itchy all over. And that entire it was into the night, into the next morning, I was so itchy, scratching everywhere. And I was like, Zach, my back. And he's scratching my back and trying to help me. And he's like, I don't want to scratch anymore. I feel like you're getting red lines from scratching. I'm like, I don't care. Keep scratching. So we called the nurse. We're like, do you have anything for this? Can I take some Benadryl? Anything. She's like, we don't really have much, but for this in particular, but Benadryl, sure. So I took some Benadryl. That didn't really do anything, but I'm, thinking maybe it will. That was really weird. That lasted for 24 hours. So lots of just itchiness. And then after 24 hours, it totally went away. And I felt great. Obviously once all of the medication wore off completely, then I felt the incision, right? Then I felt all that was going on down there that I had not felt. I'm like, this is wonderful. I feel amazing. For the first 12 plus hours. Then it all wore off and I was in pain. And of course, they're giving you meds, every 6 hours or whatever. So you're managing it, but you're just whoa, I'm really sore. And just every task, getting up and going to the bathroom, everything was just hard. And there's little milestones that they want you to reach over the weekend before they let you go home, of just making sure that you can urinate, have a bowel movement, all of these functions are working, that you're not getting any sort of infection in your incision, that everything looks clean and fresh and all that stuff, that you're not in excruciating pain that's abnormal. So thankfully I kept hitting all the normal milestones, and same with Caroline. She lost a little bit of weight, which is normal for newborns, but not enough that it was concerning. So she, Sunday, so it was Friday night, Saturday night, and then Sunday morning, we were really, really hoping to go home. But with C-sections, they tell you 2 to 3 days, at least that's what they told me, because they if you don't hit some of these milestones where baby loses too much weight or they feel concerned about something, they might say, hey, we recommend staying another night or whatever. But I was so ready to get home. It was, the hospital was great and all, but just like sleeping in your own bed, bringing your baby home, getting back together with our boys, like all being together as a family, just the comforts of your own space. I was so ready for that. So, thankfully we hit all the markers, and then Sunday came and we ended up having to stay most of that day because my doctor had to come around and do a rotation and check her and make sure that, she was good. Sorry, actually check me, make sure I was good. And then we had the on-call pediatrician had to come by and check her, which he was every day. But that final check on Sunday, like, yep, she looks good, and then give us the thumbs up that we could leave. So we got thumbs up from him, thumbs up from my doctor. And we're like, yes, we're going home. So Sunday night, we load up all of our stuff. We had a lot of stuff. Probably way too much. They put me in the wheelchair. It's like protocol for taking me out to the car. And the nurse pushes me. I'm holding Caroline and everybody's congratulating us on the way out, sweet baby girl, congratulations and all that. And again, just that realization of like, I am holding my baby and I'm leaving the hospital because I just had a baby. Like, it's just like mind blowing every single part of it, after 12 years of infertility, it's hard to imagine. And then you're in it and you're just like overwhelmed by everything. So we get to get to our car and the car seat's in there we actually already had the car seat. Caroline was in it. And then we put her, lock her into the base, and I'm sitting in the back next to her and I'm just watching her the whole way home. Like, how am I bringing a baby home? Like, I'm telling you, it was like every single little moment, everything we did, it was just like, how, like, Lord, thank you. So we take her home. And one of my sisters, so sweet, had ordered one of those big like storks that they can put in your yard, that it's like, it has the little, like the bundle in its mouth, and it has the name of your baby and the weight and the birth date and all that. And then these other two little signs for Caleb and Christian that said Big Brothers. Just so sweet. So arriving home to that in the yard was really, really special, like a really sweet little surprise. And then our boys were at home, and then them getting to come out and see baby sister again at home was so amazing. And going inside all together that Sunday night and just sitting on our, living room couch and like holding the baby and looking around, like, this is a dream. Like, this is so amazing. So I just thank the Lord on so many fronts for the birth, for the health of Caroline, for the smooth transition from the hospital to home, for both of us in the hospital hitting all of the markers that they want to see to discharge you, for the C-section going really well. And then, of course, now I'm up against like, okay, the fourth trimester, as they call it, right? Postpartum. Like, now I'm home, now I'm recovering, and not getting back to normal, right? Because I'm not getting back to normal. My goal was like resting and just continuing to figure out breastfeeding. But, you're now in this like postpartum phase of, okay, figuring out like just health and recovery and kind of life now as a family with 3 kids and with this newborn. And it was beautiful and so sweet, and also challenging. There were challenges like those first early weeks. We're up all night. Caroline really struggled to breastfeed. So I was doing a lot of pumping and a lot of like triple feeding, pumping, and then giving her, first attempting to breastfeed. So always working on that, attempting to breastfeed, 10, 15 minutes, and then pumping, and then giving her the pumped milk through a bottle. So a very lengthy process. And this would go on all day and all night. And at that age, they're eating like every 2 hours. So it was just a lot. And thankfully, Zach had off work for a few weeks. So he was extremely helpful. I kept calling him super dad. Like, you are amazing. Like, I've never seen you with a newborn. And he was nervous a little bit about having a newborn. He's like, I know how to do older kids, but newborns really intimidate me. I don't know what to do with them. They're so fragile and little. And he crushed it. Like, that's why I'm like, I jokingly call him a professional dad. I'm like, you're like professional at this. You've never had a newborn. Like, how are you so good? But he just jumped right in every way and was the most supportive, the most helpful, everything from changing diapers to helping me get around to making food, taking our older boys, coming back, holding Caroline, giving her the bottle if I, needed to pump, and it was easier that way. He would get up with me every time at night and help and just change diapers and do the bottle while I would pump in the middle of the night so we could go faster. So incredibly helpful. I'm just so thankful and praise God for that, for him. But those first few weeks were really, really intense, and we were getting very little sleep. We were very exhausted, but we didn't have any big plans, right? Like, I had taken off everything from Girl Defined. I was completely on maternity leave. He was off from work for a couple of weeks, so we could solely focus on just Caroline, our boy's life with a newborn. And that was our priority, just resting and figuring things out. So there wasn't pressure of having to be anywhere or do anything. We had incredible family and friends making all of our meals for us, snacks, drinks, like everything. So there was like really nothing that I had to focus my attention on except like our family. And so much of that was just going to Caroline, obviously, in those early weeks and into that first month. So yeah, lots of sleepless nights, but things got a little better as time went on. She still struggled to latch and to transfer milk well. Got to the point where she would sometimes nurse for like 45 minutes, an hour, and transfer like maybe an ounce. We were doing weighted feeds before and after. So we were working with a different lactation consultant once I got out of the hospital. She was amazing. And she just kept every time, we'd go once a week and then sometimes multiple times a week. And she had just so many little things that she was able to help Caroline with, just orally, just structurally, how to hold her, how to help her get a better latch, examining tongue tie issues, high palate issues, just being early term. She was, like most newborns, very sleepy, but extra sleepy, especially in those first few weeks, could barely stay awake for anything. So just challenges there. But as we persevered, and my prayer was, Lord, I want to breastfeed so bad. Like that was my goal. Like I will do everything it takes to get there, like everything, as long as it takes, but maybe not as long. I'm like, if we reach a point where it's just not working, and I, in my brain, I was thinking like months down the road, like maybe 6 months or beyond, then obviously, I'm so thankful that there are other options. Pumping and doing a bottle is an option. Formula is an option. Like I'm thankful there are other options. But of course, my personal goal and dream was to be able to exclusively breastfeed. So we kept persevering, even though it was hard and tedious and the appointments were sometimes really disappointing with just the lack of progress. Sometimes it felt like 1 step forward, 3 steps backwards. But as we kept after it and Caroline continued to grow and just develop and get bigger and stronger, she slowly but surely became more efficient at transferring milk, and her latch got better. And right around the 12-week mark, so just recently, like in the past few weeks, she just kind of turned a corner. I think maybe developmentally and all the things that we were doing. We were also going to a chiropractor. She really turned a corner and just started getting it. And I was continuing to do weighted feeds with my lactation consultant at home and at her office. And I started noticing the numbers were increasing, like the ounces that she was getting from the beginning to the end of a feed. And she started transferring more and more, and eventually enough where I felt like I could confidently breastfeed her without the fear of like, is she getting enough, because before she would feed for like 45 minutes and then just be so hungry screaming because I knew she was like getting an ounce. So that was a huge deal when I dropped most of my pumping sessions to where I only had 2, morning and night. And then I dropped that down to 1 in the morning. And now I will sometimes pump in the morning. Sometimes I won't. I like to pump in the morning just because I can sometimes have a little extra to store up some milk in the freezer. So if like mother-in-law or someone's watching Caroline, I can give them milk for her. So sometimes I'll still do that, but she is now exclusively breastfeeding, which is a massive answer to prayer. And I'm just so encouraged. All of the hard work she did and I did with the help of our amazing lactation consultant finally got us to where we want to be. And now it's just so wonderful, like to get to just breastfeed her wherever. And I know for a lot of women, that's their desire and their goal, and that doesn't always work out. And I get that, like the struggles of that longing and not knowing if it's going to happen. There were many tears. I'm like, how is this such an emotional roller coaster? Like so many tears of just like, will this ever work out? And just the struggle and like, why is like, this is supposed to be such a natural part of God's design. Why is this so hard? But it just is, and it can be. And I know for some people, it's like the baby latches and it's no problem and they're on their way. So I know that happens too, but that was not our story. So that kind of takes us to where we are now. And if you're watching this, you can see Caroline. If you're not, she's just snoozing away in my lap. She's got her arm like limp hanging out. So happy. Just such a happy baby. She really is. If she's fed, had her naps, like she is such a happy, content baby. She just loves life. She's now to that point where she's just starting to laugh, like so interactive with the smiles, loves to look around. She loves to be in a carrier, so we do a lot of contact naps. She's not a huge fan of her crib. Sometimes she'll go for it, but she normally just loves to be on me and her carrier. And so figuring out, that was a big transition actually, figuring out Caroline. And as we started school, many of y'all know I homeschool. So figuring out how to homeschool my older boys while having an infant, that was a big transition. But thankfully, Caroline loves the carrier so much that I can just put her in that. She's so happy. And then I can like bounce back and forth with my boys and work on school and then like take a break, breastfeed her, maybe try to lay her down for a nap if she'll go for it, put her back in the carrier. We just have a great rotation. So I feel like we're in a really great place. But that was a pretty big transition. So yeah, there's still lots to figure out. We have challenging days. Some days are really hard still. Some days just feel like, oh, that was great. That was easy. That was breezy. And then some days not so much. Nighttime, she's still getting up at least once, sometimes twice to feed. So, we breastfeed in the night. Sorry, there's like a hair in my eye. If you're watching this, you can see I'm trying to figure out where it is. So we're not to that place where we're like getting awesome sleep yet, but it's not bad, especially compared to the early days. It is so much better. So yeah, I'll keep you guys posted. Follow along on Instagram at Girl Defined, my personal account as well. You can find it through the Girl Defined account, but I don't post a lot of updates, but every now and then I'll post a little something and you can kind of follow along with our journey. But yeah, thank y'all so much for all the years of prayers. I know so many of you have been praying for me, for Zach over the years. And even when I announced Caroline that I was pregnant, so many of y'all were like, I've been praying for this, praise God, like rejoicing with us. So thank you for your incredible support, for your prayers. The miracle of God answering this prayer. He can do anything. And just a word of encouragement to any of you women who are in that place of unfulfilled longing, especially infertility, longing for a baby. I don't know what God has for your future. I'm not going to say like it'll happen because I don't know. Only the Lord knows. And that's where I was. But my biggest encouragement to you is just lean into Him, into your relationship with Him, because I came to a place where I truly was satisfied in Him. There was a peace in my heart, even though that longing was still there. He was helping me grow to be able to hold my longing in one hand, but hold contentment and trust and satisfaction in my walk with Him in the other hand at the same time, continuing to pray, continuing in that longing. But my hope and my happiness wasn't dependent on getting that prayer answered, if that makes sense. So I pray that for you as well in your journey of unfulfilled longing. Thanks for joining along today. Go check out YouTube if you are listening to this so you can see the cutie little Caroline. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.